A septuagenarian enters a grocery store, intent on purchasing milk and bread. Mere moments later, she finds herself in handcuffs, accused of theft, as she is led away amidst a hushed crowd, their eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. It seems as though no one is truly listening. The cameras remain unchecked by anyone. A hurried trial stands poised to condemn her. As she lifts the receiver to her ear and dials her son's number, an eerie hush falls over the courtroom. Will justice triumph? Or will she be entombed by a fractured system? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Is justice genuinely accessible to all, or is it reserved solely for the powerful? Now, let us plunge into this captivating tale. The waning afternoon sun lingered in the sky, draping long golden ribbons over the weathered pavement of Chestnut Street. The air was saturated with heat, dense and oppressive, turning each inhalation into a laborious task. Jessica Carter emerged onto her modest front porch, her fingers curling around the weathered railing as she carefully made her way down the steps. The ache in her knees was a dull, persistent reminder of time's passage, a discomfort she had learned to accept as part of her daily existence. They told her it was arthritis. All that remains is to navigate it. She tilted the wide-brimmed hat, a barrier against the sun's relentless rays, and cast her gaze upward at the imposing apartment buildings that now stood where the humble homes of her childhood once thrived. The landscape of the neighborhood had transformed. The visages varied. The once warm greetings and familiar nods of yesteryears had dissipated, supplanted by the aloof gazes of affluent newcomers who strode through these streets as if they had always belonged, leaving her to fade into the shadows of invisibility. For more than 4 decades, Jessica had called this place home. In this place, she had nurtured a son, laid to rest a husband, and imparted knowledge to countless children throughout the years. And yet, on certain days, it seemed as though the world had continued its journey, leaving her behind. Today unfolded with a simplicity that felt almost refreshing, merely an errand to attend to. Milk and bread sourced from Mike's Market. She delved into the pocket of her airy summer dress, her fingers brushing against the crisp, neatly folded $10 bill. All she desired was Jamal Carter, her beloved boy. The mere idea of him ignited a comforting glow within her heart. The pride, the affection, the pain. Jamal had shed the innocence of childhood, no longer the small boy who would dash home from school, brimming with excitement to share the tales of his day. Gone is the youth who once occupied that modest kitchen table, resolute in his quest to navigate every debate team practice with fervent arguments. He had become a man of great strength. The Attorney General of the United States, accompanied by her son, stands as the foremost law enforcement official in the nation. The call of righteousness, the champion of veracity, the champion of veracity. Yet amidst his achievements and victories, there were moments when she questioned whether he perceived the world through the same lens as she did, whether he still recalled the sensation of being utterly powerless. He reached out whenever he had the chance, sent presents when he overlooked, forever affectionate, consistently courteous, yet perpetually occupied. Overwhelmed by the demands of time, I find myself unable to indulge in lengthy visits. Overwhelmed by the demands of time, I find myself unable to engage in lengthy dialogues. So caught up in the whirlwind of life, she hardly realized the depth of her longing for him. Jessica remained silent on the matter. She would never do such a thing. A mother's love transcended the frequency of her son's visits. It resided in the profound understanding that he was out there, secure, making a positive impact in the world. Yet she yearned for the echo of his laughter to fill the home once more, the gravity of his being, the solace found in the realization that she was not solitary. Yet today, such thoughts would not cross her mind. Today unfolded as merely a series of tasks to complete. Jessica glided along the sidewalk, her movements deliberate and cautious, each step a testament to her carefulness. The summer heat enveloped her, a heavy and suffocating embrace. She gripped her petite purse a bit more firmly, not from fear but from instinct. The streets carried a new essence now. The streets were lined with an abundance of glass storefronts, and modern cafes buzzed with the energy of a younger, affluent crowd. Individuals cradling their extravagant lattes, gazing beyond her as though she were merely a fixture of the scenery. Just another remnant of a bygone era they were keen to obliterate. With a soft sigh, she dismissed the thought, shaking it from her mind. Not today. Jessica Carter had experienced enough of life to understand the intricacies of the world around her. She was well aware of the guidelines. Do not tarry for an extended period. Ensure your hands remain visible at all times. Advance with intention, yet maintain a measured pace. Refrain from providing them with any justification. In the days of his youth, she imparted these lessons to her son. And now, years later, they remained carved into her very being, untouched by the passage of time. She arrived at the threshold of Mike's Market, a quaint community-driven shop that had, against all odds, weathered the storm of gentrification. As she crossed the threshold, the bell rang gently, filling the air with its delicate sound. The rush of cool air from the air conditioning enveloped me, offering a fleeting reprieve from the sweltering heat beyond the walls. Jessica straightened her spine, delicately adjusting her hat. A brief excursion, swift and seamless. She glided toward the dairy aisle, her fingers lightly grazing the cool glass of the refrigerator door. First, the milk, next, the bread, and finally, the journey home. Uncomplicated. Unbeknownst to her, the fabric of her existence was on the brink of transformation. The store resonated with a serene familiarity. The soft whir of refrigerators, the sporadic beep of the register, and the faint murmur of customers creating a gentle backdrop. Jessica Carter lingered in the dairy aisle, her hand stretching toward a carton of milk. The delightful chill of the condensation against her fingertips offered a refreshing reprieve, a much-needed escape from the oppressive warmth beyond. Then a shift, a fleeting glimpse of motion at the edge of her sight. A young man, perhaps in his early 20s, with his hoodie pulled up and his head bowed, strides quickly onward. Jessica's gaze trailed after him, her attention captured as his hands moved with a swift precision, deftly filling his pockets with energy bars from the shelves. Without a moment's pause, he turned sharply toward the exit, his steps transforming from tentative to brisk. And then the sound echoed. Beep, beep. The alarm pierced the stillness of the store. The sound sliced through the air with a sharp crack. Oh, God. Jessica pivoted at the moment the thief barreled toward the door, forcing it ajar with a powerful thrust of his shoulder. He slipped away into the bustling street, the electronic chime of the entrance echoing in the air as his silhouette faded from view. In that fleeting instant, silence enveloped the space. Hold on a moment. A resonant, authoritative voice sliced through the atmosphere, sharp and decisive. Jessica recoiled. She turned her head, anticipation coursing through her, hoping to catch sight of someone, anyone, pursuing the thief. Yet, there was not a soul in motion. The youth had vanished. Yet, a figure in a navy polo approached her with purpose, tall and broad-shouldered, a clipped badge catching the light on his belt. A cop, not in uniform, his gaze fixed on hers, keen and resolute. Jessica felt a knot tighten in her stomach. A sense of unease lingered in the air. "You." The officer's voice carried a chilling firmness. "Jessica's hands are visible to me." A solid mass lodged itself in her throat. "I find myself perplexed." The officer bridged the gap in 3 purposeful strides. Before she could respond, his grip seized her delicate arm, firm and resolute. Jessica drew in a quick breath. "Let go of me," she protested, twisting slightly in his grasp. "Do you believe you're clever?" His voice resonated with a calm assurance, as if he had already reached a conclusion within himself. "Empty your pockets," Jessica blinked. "Pockets," she repeated, perplexed. She raised the petite plastic shopping basket, still nestled in the bend of her arm. "I have yet to settle the payment." The officer scarcely registered her words. "The alarm blared," he declared with an air of indifference, "and you were present in this very moment." Jessica felt her pulse thundering in her ears. She pivoted to face the counter, her gaze landing on Mike the proprietor. "Mike," she called, her voice laced with urgency. "Convey the message to him. You witnessed. I did not take anything." Mike lingered behind the register, paralyzed in place. His gaze flickered back and forth between Jessica and the officer. For a brief moment, a glimmer of uncertainty danced across his features. He was aware. He had witnessed. He had the power to reveal the truth to them. Yet, in that moment, his expression trembled. His shoulders tensed. He cleared his throat, his gaze falling to the counter. And he replied, nothing. Jessica's breath hitched. "Mike," she attempted once more, her voice trembling. "Kindly." The sting of betrayal cut deeper than the accusation ever could. "Follow me," the officer commanded, his grip growing firmer. Jessica's body grew taut. "I assure you I have not committed any wrongdoing." Her voice ascended, tinged with a sense of urgency. A handful of customers glanced over, their eyes drawn to the scene, some murmuring softly, while others lifted their phones to capture the moment. Yet, not a single soul emerged. No one stepped in. The officer acted without waiting for her agreement. With a fluid motion, he twirled her around, compelling her hands to rest behind her back. Jessica inhaled sharply. Tap! The unforgiving grip of the handcuffs pressed harshly against her delicate wrists. The chamber swayed. Her knees almost gave way beneath the burden of it all. The utter humiliation, the sheer incredulity, the overwhelming sense of powerlessness. This was unimaginable. This was not reality. Her hands trembled against the unyielding metal. Her eyes fluttered in quick succession, her heart pounding fiercely. Beyond the glass doors, the street thrummed with vibrant energy. The boy in the hoodie had vanished, liberated at last. Jessica Carter, a septuagenarian in search of milk, found herself standing in handcuffs. A distant siren pierced the air, its wail swelling with urgency. In an instant, her entire world shattered around her. The journey to the station unfolded in silence, punctuated only by the sporadic crackle of the police radio. Jessica perched rigidly in the back seat, her hands restrained behind her, the metal cuffs biting into her wrists with a persistent ache. Through the window, the city unfolded in a cascade of neon and asphalt. Cars blaring, pedestrians bustling, life advancing relentlessly, utterly oblivious to the reality that, for her, time had come to a standstill. Her thoughts surged, striving to unravel the chaos surrounding her. In what manner? How had she transitioned from a mundane trip for milk to finding herself confined in the back of a police car, regarded as though she were a mere common criminal? She yearned to unleash a cry, to seek the truth, to compel them to hear her voice. Yet, beneath the surface, she was aware all along. She understood the intricacies of the world. She had been aware of it for as long as she could remember. The system required no evidence. It simply required a scapegoat. And this evening, that person was her. As they arrived at the station, the doors released with a distinct mechanical click. The officer in the front seat failed to cast even a fleeting glance her way as he exited the vehicle. The rear door creaked ajar, and calloused fingers seized her wrist. "Shall we proceed?" Jessica grimaced as she was pulled upright, her joints voicing their discontent at the abrupt motion. Within the confines of the station, the light was overwhelming, almost blinding. The fluorescent lights above emitted a soft buzz, their glare creating stark shadows that danced across the worn linoleum floor. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of aged coffee, perspiration, and worn pages. A sea of desks, bustling officers, and the incessant ringing of phones lay ahead of her. The scene was a whirlwind of activity, a flurry of movement. Yet amidst the commotion, the elderly woman being escorted in handcuffs went unnoticed by all. No one even glanced up. Merely another apprehension. Merely another case number. Jessica parted her lips, her voice raspy. "Please," she murmured, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "An error has occurred." No reply. She made another attempt, her voice rising in volume this time. "I assure you, I did not take anything that wasn't mine." A nearby officer let out a soft chuckle, barely audible. Indeed, that's the common refrain. Jessica felt a constriction in her chest. She glanced at the man guiding her, the very officer who had taken her into custody at the store. She implored, "Please. Check the cameras. Kindly take a moment to review them. You'll find out soon enough." "We don't need to check the cameras," he stated with an air of finality, guiding her onward. Jessica felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. He showed no inclination towards the truth. He had never been. A formidable metal door creaked open in the distance, unveiling a lengthy corridor flanked by rows of holding cells. As they drew near, another officer, taller and broader, sporting a thick mustache and a badge that proclaimed him Sergeant Hawkins, lifted his gaze from the clipboard in his hands. "Shoplifting," he murmured, casting only a fleeting look in Jessica's direction. The arresting officer confirmed that she was taken into custody at Mike's Market. The owner was nearby the shelf when the alarm blared, though she did not witness the act itself. Jessica's hands formed tight fists. "That's not true," she asserted, her voice unwavering as she fought to maintain her composure. "I found myself standing there, caught in the act of shopping. The genuine thief dashed by me." With a weary sigh, Hawkins turned the page. He inquired about the camera footage. The officer merely shrugged, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. "I neglected to verify." Stillness. Jessica felt her heart racing, a rhythmic thrum echoing in her ears. Hawkins remained utterly still, his eyes betraying no flicker of response. With a swift motion, he jotted something down and pointed toward a line of vacant holding cells. First, she processes, then she waits. Jessica gently shook her head, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. No, this isn't right," she said, her voice trembling. A sudden pull on her arm interrupted her words. She faltered ahead, crossing the threshold into yet another chamber. A sudden burst of light erupted from the camera. Jessica squinted against the blinding white glare. Yet another burst of light. Her photograph taken at the time of arrest. A machine hummed softly, meticulously scanning her fingertips and capturing the unique patterns of her fingerprints. A young officer just past his 20s pushed a form across the table in her direction. "Please provide your signature here." Jessica forced down the knot that had formed in her throat. Her hands quivered as she clutched the pen. For a fleeting moment she paused. Signing seemed to embody a quiet acceptance, a recognition that she truly belonged in this space. Yet she found herself with no alternative. The pen glided across the page, leaving behind a trail of her signature in elegant strokes. With each stroke, it seemed as though her dignity was being slowly and irrevocably erased. Once the cuffs were exchanged for snug plastic zip ties, she was escorted from the room. A different officer stepped in, youthful and apprehensive. Officer Williams. He cast a fleeting look her way, then shifted his gaze to the documents he held, only to return his attention to her once more. Jessica beheld it. The pause of uncertainty. Uncertainty looms. There was a subtle change in his expression, as if he were pondering the absurdity of a frail, elderly woman being accused of shoplifting at all. Jessica embraced the opportunity. "Son," she murmured softly, "please, just take a moment to check the cameras." Williams paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. For a fleeting moment, he appeared as though he might truly consider the words being spoken. Yet, before he could utter a single word, "Williams," a sharp voice cut through the air, commanding attention. "Sergeant Hawkins." Williams tensed. "Do you have an issue to discuss?" Hawkins inquired, his eyes narrowing with scrutiny. Williams paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "Sir, I simply must say, she perfectly matches the description." The words descended with the finality of a gavel strike. Concluding, unquestionable. Williams took a deep breath. Once again his gaze drifted toward Jessica, yet in due course he inclined his head in agreement. "Of course, sir." Jessica felt a heavy weight in her chest. She had encountered this previously. A youthful officer, a conscience struggling to break free from the depths, and then, in an instant, forced back into position. She wielded no influence in this place. She was utterly silent. She was merely a statistic, a case number lost in the sea of bureaucracy. Yet another document resides within the system. Jessica Carter, aged 70 years. Reservation confirmed. Completed. Neglected. The unforgiving chill of the metal bench dug into Jessica's back as she sat in the holding cell, her hands lying motionless in her lap. The chamber was softly illuminated, bathed in the cold, unsteady radiance of a flickering fluorescent bulb. The atmosphere was laden with the musty odor of perspiration and antiseptic, burdened by the passage of time. She released her breath in a measured sigh, attempting to calm the quiver in her fingertips. She had never crossed the threshold into a jail cell before. She never imagined she would become that way. A lifetime spent adhering to the principles, obeying the guidelines, and remaining within her designated role. What had it all come to? A reference number for the case, a claim lacking substantiation. Yet, there was not a soul who had shown concern. Jessica fought against the parched sensation in her throat, her eyes wandering to the woman seated opposite her. In the bloom of youth, perhaps in their mid-20s, deeply hued skin, weary gaze, she sat curled inward, her arms encircling herself as though she wished to melt away into the darkness. A nurturing figure. Jessica observed the woman's posture, a reflection of someone accustomed to bearing the burdens of existence with grace. A soul weary from countless skirmishes, burdened by the weight of repeated defeats. Silence enveloped them, stretching on for what felt like an eternity. Then the woman shifted, casting a hesitant glance up at Jessica. "So, they ensnared you as well, did they?" Her voice was soft, tinged with weariness. Jessica bestowed a subtle, acrid smile. "It appears to be so." The woman inclined her head, releasing a breath through her nostrils. She cast her gaze upon her hands, nervously toying with the tattered edges of her sweatshirt's cuffs. "What brings you to this place?" Jessica inquired softly. The woman let out a derisive laugh, her head shaking in disbelief. "I took a granola bar," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "My little girl was hungry. I lacked sufficient funds, and I pondered." She fell silent, her lip caught between her teeth. Jessica felt a deep ache in her chest. A humble granola bar. Her mind wandered to the young man at the store, cramming fistfuls of food into his hoodie, dashing out the door, liberated. And yet, here sat a mother, confined within the cold walls of a cell for the simple act of trying to nourish her child. Jessica gently shook her head, a slow and deliberate motion. "It's not right," she whispered softly. The woman emitted a laugh that was devoid of warmth, a sound as arid as the desert sun. "Isn't that so?" Her voice resonated. In environments such as these, the concept of right holds little significance. Jessica lapsed into silence, for she understood. She had devoted her entire existence to the conviction that by adhering to righteousness, by embracing the rules, and by embodying patience and kindness, the universe would reciprocate that benevolence. Yet she sat in this cold, unforgiving room, enveloped by the heavy burden of injustice. Doubt began to creep into her mind, leaving her uncertain of her beliefs. The woman let out a sharp breath, her hands moving to her face in a weary gesture. "My baby's with my sister," she murmured, more to herself than to Jessica. "Uncertainty looms over my stay, leaving me to ponder the duration of my confinement. I find myself uncertain about my ability to confront it." Jessica sensed a change within her, a simmering rage, a deep, brooding anger, not solely for her own plight but for the woman standing before her. For every woman who had occupied this very cell before them, for all who never found their way out. She extended her hand across the void that separated them, softly resting it atop the younger woman's. "You will," Jessica said, her voice a gentle yet resolute whisper. "You shall confront it." The woman gazed at her, a flicker of something hidden behind her weary eyes. A glimmer of hope, or perhaps merely the distant echo of it. A profound stillness enveloped them. Jessica reclined against the wall, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, absorbing the soft murmur of the lights overhead. In that moment, she found her thoughts drifting away from her own concerns for the first time that night. Her thoughts drifted to her son, and whether she possessed the fortitude to reach out to him. The door to the holding cell groaned as it swung open. A uniformed officer lingered in the doorway, clipboard clutched tightly, their expression a mask of neutrality, utterly detached. It was merely another ordinary night for him. "Carter," he uttered. Jessica straightened her posture, her spine rigid against the chill of the bench. She sensed the young woman beside her shift, yet her gaze remained fixed on the officer. He inclined his chin in a subtle gesture. "Only one call is permitted." A summons. For a fleeting moment, a wave of relief washed over her. Jamal, her beloved son, her cherished boy. He had the ability to mend this. He possessed the power. The power that commands respect. With a single call, he could watch this entire nightmare vanish, dissipating like smoke carried away by the breeze. Her thoughts surged forward, envisioning the unfolding drama. Jamal picked up on the very first ring, his voice, a blend of sleepiness and sharp awareness. "Mother? What seems to be the issue?" he inhaled sharply as she elaborated. The stillness on the other end as he absorbed the weight of it, and then the hushed tempest in his voice. "I will take care of it." With a deep breath, Jessica rose to her feet. She trailed behind the officer through a shadowy corridor, navigating between desks strewn with paperwork, coffee cups, and harried officers too engrossed in their tasks to notice her presence. A phone rested on a metal counter, its surface marked by age and scratches. The cord, worn and tattered, bore the marks of countless years of service. The officer made a sweeping motion in its direction. "You have a mere 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to erase this from existence. Just 5 minutes to relinquish her dignity to another." Jessica extended her hand, her fingers poised delicately above the receiver, and then she came to a halt. Her hand quivered, ever so slightly. She gulped. Jamal had dedicated his entire existence to shaping the man he had ultimately become. He had battled for every single thing he possessed. He had ascended to heights she had never imagined he could reach. And now, after everything, she was meant to pull him back to the very place he had devoted his entire life to fleeing, to remind him that, regardless of his achievements and the influence he commanded, ultimately, his mother remained just another black woman, vulnerable to being cast into a cell without a moment's hesitation. Could this provoke his anger? Certainly. Would he mend it? Absolutely. Yet, one must ponder the price to be paid. Would it portray him as vulnerable? Will it make the headlines tomorrow? The mother of the Attorney General has been taken into custody for shoplifting. Did it constitute preferential treatment? Would they claim that his pursuit of justice was only ignited when it touched his own life? Jessica released a tremulous breath. She simply couldn't bring herself to do that to him. Her whole existence had been devoted to shielding him from the harsh realities of this world. She refused to be the catalyst for their betrayal against him at this moment. Gradually, she retracted her hand. The officer drummed his pen against the clipboard, a flicker of impatience crossing his features. "Are you going to make the call or not?" Jessica aligned her posture with purpose. When she spoke, her voice held a steady cadence. The officer's brow furrowed in disapproval. "Are you certain?" She gave a single nod. "I will navigate this journey on my own." She pivoted, retreating toward the corridor, moving back to the holding cell. She remained silent. She refused to plead. She refused to plead. She had traversed 70 years of life, never once relying on the kindness of others. She had no intention of beginning at this moment. As she made her way back to her seat, the chill seeping further into her bones, a thought flickered in her mind for the first time. Had she chosen poorly? The courtroom exuded a chill, not from the air but from the atmosphere itself. Jessica perched uncomfortably at the defendant's table, her wrists throbbing from the constricting zip ties, her body weary from a night of restless slumber. The fluorescent lights above emitted a stark brightness that illuminated every detail. The gleaming surface of the judge's bench, the meticulously arranged files on the prosecutor's table, and the apathy etched on the faces surrounding her. She had entered this room previously, not as an accused, but as a woman who held a steadfast belief in justice. Years ago, she had occupied a seat in the gallery, observing a case as it unfolded before her eyes. In that moment, she held a steadfast belief that the law would inevitably triumph, that truth would emerge, buoyant and undeniable, like oil on water. At that moment, uncertainty began to creep in. At the front of the room, Judge Thomas Mercer adjusted his glasses, his keen blue eyes meticulously surveying the documents laid out before him. He hardly cast a look in her direction. Jessica discerned the type of man he was, one who had already formed his conclusions long before the trial commenced. "Let's proceed," he said, his voice sharp and purposeful, as if this were merely another task to complete. The prosecutor rose, a figure clad in a sharp gray suit, his voice gliding through the air like silk, exuding an aura of unwavering confidence. "Your Honor," he commenced. At the scene of the crime, the defendant was discovered. The officer on duty observed her in close proximity to the pilfered items. Considering her closeness and the situation at hand, the conclusion is evident. Jessica's jaw clenched. Nearby area? Is that truly what they referred to it as? She had embarked on a shopping expedition. She had been purchasing milk, her hands tightly balled in her lap, nails digging into her palms. The man designated as her defense attorney, appearing weary and disheveled in his crumpled suit, scarcely raised his gaze. "Your Honor," he murmured, idly sifting through the case file as though it were a recent acquisition. "We kindly request a review of the store's security footage." At last, Jessica let out a breath, her heart momentarily soaring. If they had only viewed the footage, if they had merely taken a glance, but there was no need. The prosecutor interjected with a calm assurance. Jessica's breath hitched. The prosecutor pressed on, his voice unwavering and practiced, confirming that the camera system at Mike's Market had indeed been malfunctioning on that particular day. Stillness. Jessica's fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of the table. Negative. Judge Mercer exhibited little to no response. He nodded, a gesture that suggested he had anticipated that response all along. Jessica pivoted abruptly to face her lawyer. "Say something," she whispered, her voice laced with urgency and desperation. He let out a weary sigh, his fingers tracing circles on his temples. "The camera's down," he muttered. "There's little we can do regarding that matter. There isn't much that can be done." Jessica experienced the words as if they were a sharp blow. She cast her gaze back at Judge Mercer, then shifted her attention to the prosecutor and finally to the jury. What scant remnants remained. Their decision had been made long before. Truth held no significance. It was of no consequence that she had committed no offense. This was not a matter of justice. This centered around ease and simplicity. This was about placing the appropriate individual in a cell to resolve the case. She was a 70-year-old black woman, stripped of power and influence, standing as the most vulnerable target in the room. The trial was progressing at an alarming pace. Jessica sensed she was submerged, the words swirling around her in a chaotic dance, yet none seemed to hold meaning. Her attorney was not advocating on her behalf. The judge appeared indifferent to her words. The system she had once placed her faith in was now casting her aside, as if she were merely an afterthought. Her throat constricted. She would be defeated. They would lay her to rest, and no one would mourn. The prosecutor stated with a measured tone that the prosecution suggests a bail amount of $10,000. Jessica's gaze shot upward, her heart constricting in her chest. $10,000? She released a laugh that was both breathless and tinged with disbelief. $10,000? For a carton of milk and a loaf of bread? For naught? She glanced at her lawyer, anticipating his objection, hoping for a counter. He did not. He was busy adjusting his tie, his thoughts already drifting to what lay ahead. That was the moment. That was everything they possessed. Jessica sensed her universe constricting, the walls closing in around her. She found herself unable to battle this, not by herself. Her breath grew increasingly short and shallow. And then, a notion emerged. A title. Jamal. Jessica paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. She had promised herself she wouldn't reach out to him. She had promised herself that she would navigate this journey on her own. Yet now, it transcended mere dignity. It revolved around the instinct to endure. Gradually, she raised her hands. "Your Honor," she said, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Judge Mercer arched an eyebrow. Jessica swallowed hard, the knot in her throat tightening with each passing moment. "I would like to place my solitary phone call." Mercer inclined his head in agreement. The bailiff stepped forward, guiding her toward the phone mounted on the wall beside the courtroom doors. With trembling hands, Jessica raised the receiver to her ear. She had never experienced such a profound sense of insignificance, such utter helplessness. With a steady hand, she entered the digits she had etched in her mind. The sound echoing from the other end was overwhelming. At one time, 2 times. "Next, proceed to click." A voice that resonates with familiarity. "Mother?" Jessica's lips parted, yet silence enveloped her. Her throat was aflame. "Mother, what troubles you?" Jamal's voice took on an edge, becoming instantly attentive. Jessica released a tremulous breath. Then, just above a whisper, "Jamal. Darling, I long for your presence." The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with anticipation. For the first time since this ordeal commenced, Jessica found herself in the company of another. The imposing wooden doors of the courtroom creaked open, resonating with a muted thud. Every gaze shifted. A tall figure clad in a meticulously tailored navy suit entered the room, the sound of his polished shoes echoing sharply against the marble floor. His presence was commanding, electric, reminiscent of a storm approaching on the horizon. Jessica had witnessed her son in countless settings, graduation stages, courtrooms, the evening news, but never in this light. With his jaw clenched tightly, eyes ablaze with a simmering intensity, he exuded an aura that commanded both attention and respect. This was more than merely her son. Introducing Jamal Carter, the Attorney General of the United States. He had arrived for his mother. A silence enveloped the space. Even Judge Mercer, who had scarcely cast a glance at Jessica prior, sat up straighter in his chair. Jamal's gaze swept across the courtroom until it landed on her. In that fleeting instant, Jessica sensed a delicate fissure in the burden that weighed heavily upon her heart. She found herself in the company of others. Yet the prosecutor was already on his feet, already in motion, already striving to stay one step ahead of the impending storm. "Your Honor," he said, his voice smooth and unwavering. "This is utterly unacceptable." The existence of Jamal acted without seeking approval. He strode directly to the defense table, his fingers clutching the back of Jessica's chair. In a courtroom, his mother stood trial, accused of nothing at all. His voice carried a serene quality, yet the rumble beneath it was undeniable. "I wish to view the footage." The prosecutor released a breathless laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "Mr. Carter, it has been established that the surveillance system at the store was not functioning properly on that particular day. There exists no—" Jamal pivoted, his eyes fixed intently on the prosecutor. A quiet test of resolve. A palpable tension filled the room. "I want to see the footage," Jamal insisted once more. At this very moment, the prosecutor cleared his throat, casting a sidelong glance at Judge Mercer, seeking a silent ally. The judge paused, lingering in uncertainty for just a heartbeat too long. In that moment, Jessica perceived the change. Jamal wasn't merely inquiring. He was exerting influence. In an instant, the judge, the prosecutor, and the officers present grasped the undeniable truth. This was no longer a case they could simply dismiss. This was more than merely an elderly woman facing allegations of shoplifting. This was the progenitor of the United States, chief legal officer. Should they falter, this courtroom might very well transform into the next sensational headline across the nation. Judge Mercer let out a weary sigh, his fingers deftly adjusting the glasses perched on his nose. He shifted his gaze toward the prosecutor. "Is there any footage available?" A moment of stillness. A moment of uncertainty. At last, the prosecutor let out a sharp breath. "Indeed," he conceded. Jessica felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. Thus, they had deceived. They had been aware from the very beginning. Jamal's jaw clenched with tension. He held onto the chair with unwavering resolve. He faced the judge. "I hereby request an immediate order to present the footage in this courtroom." Judge Mercer paused, a moment of uncertainty flickering across his face. Yet, on this occasion, he found himself with no escape. "Granted," he uttered, his voice strained. "Present the footage." Silence enveloped the courtroom. An officer rolled in a laptop, linking it to the overhead projector. The screen shimmered with a fleeting light, and then, there she stood before me. Jessica Carter meandered through the store, her basket dangling from her arm. She extended her hand toward the milk. She carefully nestled it within her basket. She pivoted. On the far side of the aisle, a young man clad in a gray hoodie moved with urgency, hastily shoving energy bars into his pockets before making a quick escape toward the exit. Jessica's response was minimal. Her gaze was averted from him. Her focus had drifted away. She was merely perusing the aisles. The footage unfolded, capturing the thief in flight, the alarm wailing. Jessica frozen in a state of shock and confusion, until an officer burst in and seized her. As the final note faded away, an oppressive silence enveloped the room. Dense, weighty. Jessica's fingers wrapped around the edge of the table, clutching it as if it were her lifeline. She pivoted gradually to face the prosecutor. His complexion was notably pallid. He swallowed, his throat moving in a subtle, rhythmic motion. Judge Mercer reclined in his chair, his fingers drumming against the desk, his lips forming a tight line. He cast a fleeting look at Jamal before finally turning his gaze to Jessica. With a rigid demeanor, he declared that the charges are dismissed. It ought to have been a sensation of relief, a taste of triumph. Yet Jessica remained motionless, the burden of the last day bearing down on her chest. It was not a sense of relief. It was sheer fatigue, for the simple reason that the truth had always lingered in the shadows, waiting to be unveiled. They simply hadn't bothered to glance. The judge's gavel came down upon the wooden bench, delivering a decisive and resonant thud. The case has been dismissed. Jessica Carter had finally found her freedom. Yet she found no sense of triumph. She rose gradually, the rigidity in her joints nearly dulling the profound pain that lingered within her chest. The courtroom hummed with activity, attorneys murmuring softly, the rustle of documents filling the air, and the wooden benches groaning as individuals rose to depart. Yet Jessica stayed motionless. Her eyes ascended, capturing the attention of Judge Thomas Mercer. At last, after all the time she had spent in this courtroom, he finally turned his gaze toward her, truly observed her. In his gaze, there lingered no hint of apology, no trace of regret, only a deliberate, calculated silence. Jessica inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with a steady breath. Then she uttered her words. Her voice carried no trace of anger. It wasn't deafening, yet it sliced through the atmosphere with the precision of a sharp edge. Had I not been blessed with a formidable son, would justice have remained my ally today? The words lingered in the air, dense and stifling. Silence enveloped the room, for they were all acutely aware of the truth that lingered unspoken. Jessica lingered in his gaze for a heartbeat longer before she turned away. She approached the courtroom doors, each step measured and intentional. She had found her freedom. Yet this was far from justice. This was a kind gesture, and favors did not equate to fairness. As Jessica emerged into the open air, she found the world already in motion. As Jessica emerged into the open air, she found the world already in motion. In a cacophony of reporters, cameras capturing every moment, and a flurry of microphones thrust toward her. Madam Carter? Mr. Carter, what is your response to the allegations directed at this court? Jamal positioned himself before her, his sturdy silhouette shielding her from the throng of reporters. No comments, he stated with conviction, steering his mother toward the car that awaited them. Yet the tempest had already commenced. That evening, Jessica's visage graced the news broadcast. A headline flickered across the screen. Was the Attorney General's mother wrongfully arrested? Is this a case of racial bias? The footage captured within the store graced the screens of every prominent network. Onlookers observed. Responses emerged. Answers were sought by the public. Shortly thereafter, an internal inquiry into Judge Mercer and the prosecutor's management of the case was declared. At last, the system found itself compelled to justify its existence. Silence enveloped the house. Jessica perched by the window, gazing out at the sprawling city, where distant lights flickered like stars scattered across the horizon. She ought to have felt secure, yet the burden of the last day lingered heavily within her heart. She had devoted her entire existence to the ideals of fairness, adhering steadfastly to the rules of the game, and yet, ultimately, it was not truth that delivered her from her plight. It was sheer power. Her fingers glided along the edge of the teacup cradled in her hands, the warmth anchoring her in the moment. At that moment, the phone began to ring. With a delicate motion, she extended her hand, bringing it to her ear. Greetings. A moment of silence lingered in the air. Then, Jamal's voice emerged, low and steady. Mother, I vow that I will not allow this to befall anyone else. Jessica gently shut her eyes. A languid, profound inhalation. Beyond the walls, the city throbbed with vitality. For the first time in ages, a sensation began to awaken within her chest. Not rage, not sorrow. Yet there remains hope. Ensure you never overlook another compelling narrative like this one. Your support is invaluable. It fuels our creativity, breathes life into these narratives, and sustains the dialogue. United, we can illuminate the reality that lies beneath the surface. I appreciate your presence on this journey. Until we meet again in the next tale.